To the second Cerame-Unie webinar on this circular economy. I'm your moderator, Catherine Sheridan from Sustainability Consult in Brussels. I'm a consultant working to build credibility in sustainability and leadership. You can check out the first webinar on opportunities of the circular economy on Cerame-Unie's YouTube channel. And today, our discussion is about sustainable construction through the circular economy under the Green Deal. And I think we're probably all used to webinars by now, but just in case, this session is being recorded and shared to YouTube. If you have any technical issues, please try to reconnect. We have a keynote speaker today, then 2 presentations and a Q&A session. There'll be 3 polls during the session and the results will be presented at the start of the Q&A. So if you have questions, you can put them in the Q&A box at the bottom of the Zoom screen, and you can also vote other people's questions up. We have a hashtag today, which is circular ceramics. So let's get started. Our keynote speaker is German MEP Christian Dolleschal. And Christian is a new MEP. He's been in the European Parliament since the last election in 2019. Before that, he worked as a lawyer for a construction company in Germany. So Christian, welcome, and over to you.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, dear panelists. First of all, I'd like to thank Cerame-Unie for the invitation to this online webinar. Thank you very much also to Catherine for the kind introduction. I'm very glad and honored to open today's webinar on topic of sustainable construction under the Green Deal with a short keynote speech. In the past few years, the European Union has put a stronger focus on the sustainability of buildings and construction products through a number of activities. Revision of the CPR and the Energy Performance of Buildings Directive, among others, have provided further elements of details aiming to improve the implementation. Sustainable construction and construction products offer both opportunities and challenge. In my short keynote speech, I would like to take the opportunity to give you a short overview over my own initiative draft report on the review of the CPR that I recently presented in the last Committee for the Single Market and Consumer Protection in the European Parliament this Monday. Secondly, I would like to give a brief outline how to include sustainability in construction using the example of construction product regulation. The single market is one of the most important achievements of European integration and the cornerstone of the European Union. A sector benefiting in particular from the European single market is certainly the construction sector. Uniform guidelines for the smooth movement of goods within the European Union are important. Since 1st of July 2013, the requirements and the rules of construction products regulation have been enforced, in which the requirements for manufacturers, importers and dealers are specified in detail. The construction product regulation lays down harmonized standards for the CE marking of construction products and the procedure of drawing up a declaration of performance in relation to their essential characteristics. Although the European system of technical regulations and standardization has proven to be a catalyst for the competitiveness, innovations and consumer safety, the European system of technical regulations and standardization is not yet fully implemented. However, for some years now, there has been a standstill in the design and implementation of harmonized standards for construction products. This standstill is due, on the one hand, to formal requirements, in particular the interpretation of the James Elliott ruling. On the other hand, the slow adoption and on the other, the non-certification of harmonized standards is problematic, as the process does not keep pace with developments in the construction sector. I therefore welcome the ongoing review of the construction product regulation by the Commission and the planned revisions of the regulation text. In the following couple of minutes, I would like to give you a rough overview of my priorities. I have already mentioned it. Currently, a large part of the exciting harmonized standards is in a backlog. Out of 444 existing harmonized standards, the official European journal has published only 12 in the last 4 years. One reason for this is the lack of clear and pragmatic guidelines from the Commission. In my draft report, I am therefore calling on the Commission to find a quick and practicable solution to improve the standardization process to eliminate the backlog of unpublished standards. We need both short-term and long-term solutions. I also think it is important to clearly define the scope of construction product in order to ensure that a product fulfills its intended use in a particular member state. The current immediate performance of the standardization system has also led in a practice to an increased reliance and the so-called EU tarot. However, in the long term and due to the high cost of European organization for a technical approval procedure, this is usually only affordable for a large market players. As a consequence, I strongly advocate to involve stakeholders in this consultation and evaluation process of the CPR. We need to ensure a level playing field between economic operators, especially the needs and costs for enterprises, in particular SMEs, should be taken into account in the evaluation and the review of CPR. Which brings me to the next point of my draft report, focusing on the future of the CE marking. In practice, the CE mark for building products is often interpreted as a sign of quality. However, the CE marks refers to product performance and does not indicate compliance with specific product requirements such as safety, environmental protection, or health. I therefore advocate solutions where end users receive accurate information about the safety of construction products or other requirements such as environmental and their compliance with the national requirements, for example, building safety. Digital technology could be the means in order to provide clear and transparent information to economic operators and consumers. We experience it ourselves every day. The amount of product information is constantly growing. This has also affected building products, especially in view of the growing demands in the areas of sustainability and environmental. In the future, it will no longer be possible to reproduce this information completely on a product. The best example for this are small products such as screws or doorbells, which are very small surface. Digital methods such as blockchains, QR codes, and intelligence declarations of performance could provide a reminder and thus make communication between actors in the supply chain much easier and more efficient. The revised CPR could provide the appropriate framework for this. Another focus of my draft report is on a market surveillance. This is perceived by the industry as ineffective and insufficient. However, weak market surveillance leads to the fact that more and more construction products that do not fulfill their declared performance flood our market and thus endangers the end users and consumers. In this context, it is more than necessary that national market surveillance authorities work closely with national building control authorities to identify whether a product in use in conformity with its declared performance or intended use. Like many other products, construction products are increasingly sold online. Building products such as bricks and tills and many more are no longer offered in traditional do-it-yourself stores, but more and more also online platforms. In my draft report, I therefore call for market surveillance to be extended there in particular, especially if these building products are sold from third countries. We must not make any compromises. It is not only a question of product safety, but it is also a fair competition. Which brings me to the second part of my keynote speech that will focus on the question how to incorporate the realized sustainability construction using example of the review of CPR. Construction and buildings have a significant part of European use to total waste generation and greenhouse emissions. I therefore welcome the Commission's objective to make the construction sector more sustainably by addressing the sustainability performance of construction products in the planned review of the CPR as announced in the Circular Economy Plan and the Renovation Wave. Nevertheless, the inclusion of objectives of sustainable development into the new construction products regulation should be assessed carefully. It is important to explore the relevance of incorporating certain requirements such as sustainability criteria into a harmonized standards under the CPR, so as to prove manufacturers which only single framework to the testing of products. It should be discussed if the incorporation sustainable criteria shouldn't lead to an increase in prices of construction products and construction in general, especially in the light of COVID-19 pandemic and its economic consequence. It is important not to impose unnecessary, unjustified bureaucratic obstacles on the construction sector. The effect of COVID-19 pandemic on the construction sector are evident from supply shortage in buildings materials and the absence of workers due to quarantine obligations. Economic operators, municipalities and private households are reluctant to make the investments which negatively affect the construction sector. Stakeholders require flexible, clear and easy to implement solutions in order to work towards economy recovery. In order to include realistic sustainable criteria in the construction regulation and to lower the potential above mentioned bureaucratic burden, I also propose to look into coalition rules when it comes to other harmonized areas of secondary EU law, such as Waste Framework Directive, the Eco-Design Directive, which also affect the construction products. Therefore, it is important to clarify the scope, the limits, and the relationship between them. We need to ensure policy coherence and avoid legal uncertainty for businesses. Ladies and gentlemen, sustainable construction both offers opportunities and challenge. However, economy and ecology need to be in a balance, especially in times like these. With this in mind, I would like to thank you for your attention. Unfortunately, I have to go to another meeting in a couple of minutes. That's why I can unfortunately not stay for the panel discussion. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, MEP Christian Dolleschal, for this informative keynote speech. And as you said, you do need to leave us now. So thanks again.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. So while we invite our next speaker to join us on the Zoom stage, we have a poll for you. You might have seen this in the previous webinars. We had some polls to get your input from the audience. So I would ask Cerame-Unie to launch the first poll. Okay, what would increase the uptake of circular practices in the construction sector? And we're just going to take a couple of minutes while you put your answers in. All right, I hope you've had enough time to vote in the poll. We would like to welcome our next speaker now, Josephine, and she's our policy expert today. Josephine Lindblom. She's Policy Officer for Sustainable Buildings in DG Environment at the European Commission. Josephine has a PhD in Chemical Engineering Design, and she's been working on sustainable buildings since 2011. Josephine is responsible for the development of the EU's new levels tool to measure the sustainability of a building. And she has a presentation and she'll be joining us by phone today. So Josephine, can you tell us more about levels?
I can indeed. I just want to make sure that you hear me.
I hear you loud and clear. Thank you.
Very good. Thanks for inviting me today. I'm very happy to be joining. So yes, I will be talking about levels today, which is the new European framework for sustainable buildings that the Commission has been developing for the last couple of years. So I want to share with you what that is, how it's been developed, and what in which context it will be working. So as I will not be running the slideshow myself, can I just make sure that the participants now can see my second slide on what is levels?
Yeah, we're just launching that presentation right now. Just give us a second and I'll confirm when we're on this second.
Very good. So yeah, just to say, as was already mentioned, that I do work for the European Commission at DG Environment, and we have been working very closely with a number of other DGs in the context of this initiative, in particular DG GROW and Joint Research Center, which is a technical part of the European Commission.
Great. Well, your slides are up, so you're ready to go, Josephine.
Super, thank you. So for the second slide then, what is levels? So levels is a framework to assess and report on sustainability performance of buildings, and it thereby provides a common language for this. It is not a certification scheme of any sort. There is no levels A or levels plus or something like that. So it doesn't try to push out other tools which are working in this area, but it rather tries to provide this common language to which other tools, if they're interested, can align themselves, or to which they can align themselves, whether that these are commercial certification schemes or perhaps public criteria of different sorts. Levels really takes a life cycle approach to buildings. It provides what we believe is a really robust approach to measure and support improvements from the whole life cycle, and so from design till the end of life. We have set this up for residential buildings as well as offices, and I want to stress that it is for new build as well as for renovation projects. Also important now in relation to the renovation wave, which I'm sure you're all familiar with. Levels consists of a number of core indicators which have been developed and tested in great collaboration with big numbers of stakeholders across the building sector. And it covers those indicators. They cover carbon, so whole life carbon, materials, water, but also health and comfort and resilience to climate change. And if you look at the right hand of the slide, you will see that we started already back in 2015 to develop levels. It was actually an action under the very first Circular Economy Action Plan, if you recall that, under the Juncker Commission. And as I said, we set up several groups of stakeholders to guide us and steer us in this process, and that has been extremely helpful. In 2007 to 2019, over 100 building projects across the EU tested the levels indicators the way they had been developed. It was like a beta version of levels, you could say, which we had projects testing then. And they provided us with great feedback last year, and based on that, we have now, in particular, in coordination with the JRC, we have been working to take that feedback into account when we are finalizing the work of levels. And indeed, levels will be launched in just a few weeks' time. So the next slide then, please. The third one, which is levels in the EU policy context. So we have, of course, the Paris Agreement, which talks about decarbonization of buildings. We have the SDGs, Sustainable Development Goals as well, which many of those goals touch directly on construction. Again, I want to stress that Levels really supports the full life cycle and the circularity of the full life cycle, and it does then look at design, the construction and the use of materials, the use of the building, of course, and the end of life. And when we look at the EU policy context in particular, you can see the direct links with the EU Green Deal and some of the communications that come out of the Green Deal, let's say. So we have the Circular Economy Action Plan number 2 in March this year. And then, of course, in a couple of weeks, I assume we will see the renovation wave coming out. And there again, you will see how we believe that circularity and life cycle thinking should play a big role. We know, of course, that if you look at the right-hand side of this slide, we know that about half of all our extracted materials are linked to buildings. About half of total energy consumption are linked to the full life cycle of the building. You may have seen a number of about 40% of our total energy consumption going into buildings, but that is referring to the use of the building, so heating and cooling, etc. But here I'm referring to the full life cycle, so also taking into account the embodied energy, embodied carbon. So then we come up to this number. A third of our water consumption takes place in buildings, and about a third of our total generated waste is indeed construction and demolition waste. So it's clear that also, I mean, resource-wise, linking that to climate neutrality and the embodied carbon that is going into buildings, we need to take a bigger picture of the buildings than we are doing today and really look at the full life cycle. Okay, so the next slide then, number 4. What areas does this initiative cover? So we have 3 main areas, let's say. The first one is really linked to resource use and thereby directly to environmental performance during the building's full life cycle. So that is, we have, as I said, the life cycle carbon or global warming potential. We have the resource efficient and circular material flows under this point as well, and we have the water. So these are all linked to resource use, right? But then we also have another area which is linked to health and comfort. So there we have indoor air quality and the thermal comfort as well. And then we have also things which are aspects which are linked to the cost and value and risk of the building. And there we have, for example, resilience to climate change in the form of resilience to the thermal comfort, I should say, really in 2030 and 2050, based on forecast scenarios for what the climate will look like then. And we have life cycle costing and we have value. So those are different areas that Levels cover. First and foremost, perhaps the resource use and the environmental performance, but also an important parts are those other ones, which we believe are very important also for the investors in buildings, etc. This, I would say, is an outcome really of the great collaboration that we've had with stakeholders during the development of Levels. So the 5th slide then, what are the main Levels benefits as we see it from the Commission side, but certainly as we have understood that we needed to shape it from the feedback from stakeholders so that we get it right. Indeed, a common language to improve the environmental performance and resource use, that is a key part. So to provide this, whether it is, as I said, so that commercial schemes can align themselves with it, making sure that they are sort of in line with EU policy, and also so that they can be comparable on some of the key aspects, core indicators. We've understood that this is important to them, and we see how they are now starting to align themselves with Levels. But also for member states, those member states that are interested in making sure that their own policies, whether it's building regulation or green public procurement, for example, that they start to integrate circularity into those policies. They are now looking at levels to see and get inspiration and to see what has been done at the EU level and this great development and testing. It should be a simple entry point to circularity and life cycle thinking. We are using a limited number of indicators. As you can imagine, if we want to cover everything that is important for a building, you would end up with very many indicators. And we have really tried our most to keep it to a limited number, because we want this to be as a simple entry point as possible. We know that life cycle thinking is complex for buildings, because buildings is a complex product. So we really tried to keep it to slim it down and keep it to a minimum. We believe that levels can help in identifying the hotspots during the life cycle. What would be the most important aspects to work with? We believe it can support in future-proofing buildings, whether it is related to whole life carbon, or it is resilience to climate change, value, etc. Indoor air quality, of course, as well, is very important there. We have done it so that it should help the initial client discussions, so discussions between the design team and the client. So even if you're not using it to in a quantitative way to calculate the indicators, it should be helpful in initiating this first discussion to see what are the main objectives of this building project. Greening your building portfolio, indeed, and as I mentioned before, alignment of the individual policy initiatives with a tried and tested framework at the European level. It is flexible. I mean, levels is a voluntary tool, right? And it is adapted to the user's need. And we believe that by picking the indicators that you think are the most important for your project, it could give a greater understanding of what is possible in your work. So then the next one, please. Oh, sorry. Can I just jump back to the fifth one, which we had before on the benefits, and just say that on the right-hand side, of course, we have indeed flagged which kind of stakeholders we think are the most important ones that could benefit from levels in this particular case. It is already at the planning stage with public authorities and policymakers, procurers in general, but perhaps particularly public procurers. The design team, that's a very important part. But also from investor side, we have had investors involved in the development of levels and developers as well. And then, of course, when it comes to the construction and contractors, the occupants themselves, etc. So these are the main kinds of building professionals that we're targeting, and the manufacturers of construction products, of course. All right, then just the last slide then, where you see you get some links and contact details where you can read more about us, learn more about us if you want to follow our work more closely. I should say that, remind you of that we are about to launch levels in the next month. It's the end of September now. So in October, levels will be launched. So have a look at this website or contact us to be sure that you are up to date with what's going on. And we will of course continue then afterwards in our work to link different policy initiatives to levels, whether it's green public procurement criteria, which we will be developing based on levels. We will include parts of levels in the sustainable finance work that's foreseen as well, where there is a taxonomy of buildings. And you will see in the renovation wave coming out in a few weeks, I believe, that there will be links made to circularity and levels there as well, as an example. Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you, Josephine. It's definitely a topical moment to be having this discussion when we hear from our speakers so many new things that will be coming out in the political space in the next few weeks and months. So while I invite our next speaker up, let's go to the second poll. So our next poll is on the best way to increase the reuse and recycling of construction materials at a building's end of life. We're going to leave that up for a moment for you. And I'd like to invite our next speaker, our industry speaker, to put her camera on and to join me in the Zoom stage. Our industry speaker, but I'm just going to leave you for a moment with the poll. The best way to increase the reuse and recycling of construction materials at the building's end of life. All right, then let's move on. Our industry speaker today is Gitte Nielsen. She represents the Danish Brick and Roofing Tiles Association, Danske Tegel, and she's also speaking on behalf of Cerame-Unie today. Gitte Nielsen will share some examples of circularity and best practices in the construction sector. So Gitte, over to you. You can unmute yourself and join. Yeah.
I think I'm unmuted now.
Perfect. Thank you. Go ahead.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you, Catherine, for the very, very nice introduction. I've been looking so much forward today. And as you said, so far, I've been very inspired. I am today representing the sectors that are related to Cerame-Unie. And what I'm talking about here is all of it is relevant to all these industries. But who are we? I think we can have the first slide. In the meantime, yes, I'm responsible for the Danish Brick and Roof Tile Association, and I'm located here in Denmark.
It looks like we have your slides now. There we go.
Yeah. Excellent. Okay, so that was the starting slide. You can take the next one. Thank you. So who are we actually? Cerame-Unie. We are representing the brick and roof tile industry. We have tablewares, we have wall and floor tiles, we have clay pavers, we have expanded clay, we have sanitary ware, we have technical ceramics. So as you can see, this is a very wide industry, but what we have in common, all of us, is that we have the clay as our main raw material. And on top of that, all the benefits from these products. So if I have the next slide, please. Just to give you a short view into the share of the different sectors when looking into the production, you see we have wall and floor tiles with 33%, brick and roof tiles with 20%. So these two fraction sectors, they represent approximately half of the industry production-wise. And then we have refractories on 17%, and we have on 9% abrasives and technical ceramics. And after that, we have tableware and sanitary ware and expanded clay. So this is the scene for these sectors. And we can have the next slide, please. Just for having the last, but at least some more figures. The ceramic industry, 80% are SMEs, meaning that this is really an industry representing local jobs. The number of people working here is approximately 200,000 people that are directly in jobs. And this means that this industry is actually a really relevant source of employment. We see ourselves as a motor for growth. The production value is 31 billion euro. These are the figures from 2019. And as well, we see that we find ourselves as champions within export, because we have actually, the industry has an export on at the trade from the trade balance and 4.6 billion a year. So the size of this industry is actually quite big, even though sometimes it can seem that we have small products on the shelves. This industry is very relevant to the topic of today, which is circular economy. And we see as well that the production and the use of raw materials is part of this discussion about the circular economy. So I would like to say a bit about the raw materials from our industry. As I used to say, then the clay that's coming from Mother Earth, this is raw material that is widely available, and it's actually quite easily to take from the ground. The clay pits that are left, if we have taken the clay from the ground, is actually quite limited because the clay is placed at the top level of the ground. And after preservation, the biodiversity is as it was before. Again, we have this local production issue, and that is mentioned here again because most of the factories within Europe are actually located on top of the clay, meaning that we have the raw material right outside of the door. Another important thing is, of course, the longevity and the ecological depreciation for these products. As stated here, that's more than 150 years, and when you look around in your cities, in the old cities, you can see that it's much more than 150 years. So if we have the next slide, please. So that was all something about the raw material. Looking into the production facility. Throughout the years, this industry has been very focused on optimizing their production. This goes for, of course, the energy part of it. Today we're talking in public very much about climate and the CO2. I will not address that today, but I can promise you that this industry has indeed been very focused on optimizing this part of it. Talking about raw materials as well, the use of raw materials have been minimized. The industries have throughout many years been very focused on zero waste production, and the reuse of and recycling of production material has been focused on as well. And if we take the next slide, I can give you some examples. Since we're dealing with clean products, clay, it's very obvious that the water that you use in your production, you can recycle it over and over again. The same goes for the clay involved in your production. But also, when looking into these industries, we have high temperature combustion units, and from that we have excess heat that are not just sent up into the air, but actually what we do is that we reuse it in the production in order to benefit from the heat in the drying process. This is a very important part of our production. Internal scrap has throughout all the years has been recycled back into the production. Again, we're dealing with clean raw materials, so it's quite simple, and it has been done for years. Also, we see more and more recycling of waste coming from other industries. That is, for example, fibers from paper, and we have sawdust and other materials that are introduced into the production. And of course, in order to optimize both the raw material use and our production, we are looking into product design as well. So if we can take the next slide, please. Here we have a few examples on what has been happening within product design optimization. Now you can actually go to the shop and you can buy removable and reusable floor tiles. Also, you can go to the shop and you can find, when looking into your sanitary ware shop, you can go and find stuff that are actually made of much less volume, because we have found a way to produce products that have exactly the same qualities, but with a smaller amount of raw materials. You will find thin bricks as well, if you go and look for that. If we take the next slide. A very important part of these products is the long-lasting lifetime. If we look at the bricks for houses, for example, we have more than 150 years of lifespan. The same goes for clay pipes, and we have ceramic tiles and flooring with up to 50 years of a lifespan. Sanitary ware, the same. And if you look at clay pavers, they have a lifespan of more than 125 years. Expanded clay, you can use them forever. And this means that talking about circular economy makes very good sense. So if we have the next slide, please. The quality and the long lifetime of these products, of course, gives some opportunities. And you see here, we have examples, but if you take the next slide. Reusing of roofing tiles due to the high quality and long life is obviously, and it's ongoing and has been ongoing for many years. And the same thing for the clay pavers. We can have the next slide, please. Clay pipes and bricks are 100% recyclable and reusable. Bricks are more and more seen in some parts of Europe. And I can give you a funny example. I would like to show you with the next slide. Because using bricks just like one by one, that's one option. But another option is, for example, to cut out pieces of walls and then reuse the bricks as new construction materials. And I'm confident that we will see in the future a lot of innovative ways of reusing the products from the ceramic industry due to the high quality of these products. So I think by the end of the day, it's only your imagination that can put the limits on this. This is the more or less one-to-one use. Of course, you have also the possibility of recycling, and recycling of bricks or roof tiles. You need to grind it, and you need to crush and grind the products, and then you can use it for tennis courts. You can use it for civil engineering when doing traffic route constructions and things like that. Also, for example, sanitary ware here in Denmark, we crush and grind them, and then they are sent to the production facility for insulation. Rockwool is actually using sanitary ware. So, as mentioned, the possibilities are almost unlimited. Can I have the next slide, please? But challenges, we face them as well. And one of my key points is that when talking about circular economy, the most important thing is when dealing with constructions. I mean, we have so much energy, so much volume in raw materials in these buildings that the purpose number one must be to keep the materials in the economy as long as possible. This means that we should not design constructions in order for them to be deconstructed within a short time of period. When that is being said, of course we should do that. I mean, in case we have to deconstruct the buildings, then we should take that into consideration now when doing the designing of our constructions. Design for disassembly is very important, and I think that these products from the ceramic industry, they fit very, very well into that formula. The quantity of products that are available now for reuse is limited. we see high interest in reuse of the products, but definitely the availability is a problem. And for that, it's very important that we have an efficient infrastructure for handling these products. So far, we have not seen it, and it seems that it's very hard to find a business model that is actually economically sound. So we need to have more focus on how to have this infrastructure in place. Also, the quality of the products is very, very important. I mean, on a daily basis, a lot of people is involved in securing that the construction that we make are safe and sound. But taking old products and reuse them into new constructions is potentially introducing products that if we don't have the control of the quality and we know exactly the technical performance of these products, there is a risk that we end up having constructions that are actually not in line with our standards. And we need to address that as well. It's very important. Today we have very modern production facilities. We know the quality of everything on new products, but we don't have the same track record of the older products. And we must remember that, and we have to take care of that. It's very much about also the trust in products, because what we see when people are using reused products or recycling products is normally we end up in the discussion who's willing to take the risk. And that is the barrier for the implementation of this circular economy. Because of course we need to have trust in what we build, and we need to make sure that we have people that are willing to take the risk. And they need data and confidence in their products. And then of course we have also on a regulatory basis, we see now there is a tendency that we have more and more strict regulations on the leaching, for example, from construction products. And that's fair, that's definitely fair enough, but sometimes we see that the limits, they end up being actually that low, so that we end up excluding products from being used in the industry. So limits for chemical dangerous substances is of course something that we still should be focused on, but also we have to make sure that we don't keep these reused products out of the line. And when looking into this part that is all about availability, for sure, for now, we don't look into a scenario where we have products, reused products available for what we need in the construction industry for the coming years, for many years ahead. This means that for the future, we will both have reused products, but also we will need the new products, the new produced products. And it's very important when looking into both regulations and what we do in this area, that we make sure that we assure that we have a possible and economical, reasonable condition for the industry that are producing new products for this. So, as a concluding remark, ceramic products, they are products of the nature. They are produced under very controlled and sound conditions. They have such a long lifespan, and they fit so very well into circular economy, into the criteria for sustainable constructions. And this industry fully support and are looking very much forward into dealing much more with this circular economy. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Gitta. So now it's time for our final poll. And thank you to the audience for your participation so far in the polls and in the questions. You can still put your questions in the Q&A box if you still have some. And this last poll looks at the consumer perspective, which Gitta has really touched on in her speech. what would make you choose recycled or reused construction products, ceramic products, as a consumer? I feel like Gitta's really touched on this in her part of the talk about the track record and trust. All right, so that's our poll gone. I seem to have lost my camera. If you guys could put me back on, that would be helpful, but I won't let that stop me. I'd like to thank our speakers and also our keynote speaker who had to leave us, and to you for all your questions. So I'd like to move now into the Q&A part of our webinar today. And we have Gitta Nielsen and we have Josephine Lindblom, who is on the phone. So Josephine, you can unmute yourself when you're ready and come and join us on the panel. It's not lost on me that we have an all-female panel in Brussels talking about construction. I just want to acknowledge that and put that out there. It makes a change. It's nice to see. So perhaps people have questions also triggered by the polls, in which case they're very welcome to put them still into the Q&A box, or maybe you have something that you'd like Cerame-Unie to look into further. But let's kick off, because we've got a lot of questions from the audience, and there's definitely a lot of interest in levels, Josephine, and clearly it's something that the Commission's been working on for 5 years to bring this to life. So it's understandable that there's a lot of interest. Josephine, could you just confirm when Levels is going to be launched, when it's going to go live?
Yes, I cannot give you an exact date, but we plan to do this mid-October. That should fit in nicely with the adoption of the renovation wave as well, because yeah, that ties in with that. So that's the schedule. Indeed.
Okay. Is it going to be linked directly to the renovation wave?
No. I mean, this would have happened in any case. We have not changed our timing because of that, but right. It so happens that it is at the same time. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Great. And is it going to be a? Oh, I'm not sure I follow that question. Sorry. Yeah, I'm going to move past that one. All right, let's talk in general terms about environmental performance. And Josephine, I'm sure that you're going to have something to say about this. Could setting environmental performance as a legal requirement create a level playing field and economy of scale? So not affecting the price of construction products, and also make sure that EU products don't suffer too much from lower materials or lower performance materials which are imported. Now that's quite a mouthful of a question, but what I think he's getting at is should environmental performance not be mandatory?
I think personally, I think that eventually that must be the goal. I mean, that must be the objective. The vision must be that we are talking about a climate neutral society by 2050. And in order to reach that, I think that is necessary. I mean, it's not just me thinking, it's obvious, because the buildings, our built environment, has such a great impact on our use of resources and on environmental impact throughout, and on climate and carbon. So in order to achieve that, yes, I think it is necessary eventually. And now, how do we get there? I mean, I think we will have to see some kind of a stepwise approach to that. So we are not suggesting that this should be mandatory as of next year, but we have provided this common language now, and we will ourselves look into how can we, on the EU, different kinds of EU policies, really incentivize the the use of, or let's say the application of circularity thinking, of life cycle thinking. And we will also work together with member states in their own national or even regional work sometimes to do the same. We see, for example, how some member states, which are front runners in this area, such as the Netherlands, Finland, France, Sweden, and others, they are working with different kinds of tools, for example, climate declarations for their buildings, so that they take a life cycle approach in their different building regulations. They take these aspects into account because they understand that their own targets for carbon overall in the society requires this. Otherwise, they simply won't be able to reach it. So we will work. We have been inspired by them. They are inspired by the work of Levels, and we will certainly see how we can inspire other member states to do the same. I also have a number of member states that I could think of which are working in this direction now, starting to pick up this kind of thinking, and they are then looking at Levels to see what can be done, so that they don't have to redo the whole work again, right? But I also want to stress that we are planning to start next year with the work to, together with member states, set up a roadmap for the reduction of whole life carbon with aspirational targets to see if we want to get down to whatever level we want to be at by 2050, how can we break that down and start to work towards that already now. So this is something that we will be continue to work with. Now we have the tool Levels, we have that system methodology, we have the common language, and now we can start to use that as a basis for let's say the real policy initiatives as well. So because when we started this work back in 2013, when we started the discussion, we heard from many stakeholders that we really need to push the construction and the use, etc., of sustainable buildings, but there was no clear definition of what a sustainable building was, and everybody talked about different things really. So now it took us a few years to sort of get to an agreement on that, but now we have that, and now we can start to base ourselves and policy initiatives on that.
Oh, that's great. Thank you. That gives us a lot more information. Before we go to any more questions, we're going to share the results of the 3 polls. So Cerame-Unie, you can launch the results for us to see. Okay, so the first poll was, what would increase the uptake of circular practices in the construction sector? You should all be able to see the results. We have a clear winner around the regulatory framework, but not far behind it, research and development on technical solutions. For example, what Gitta mentioned, the design for deconstruction or design for disassembly. Then economic framework, and then in last place, the standards for secondary materials, which was already mentioned. Yeah, that's interesting. That seems important for both the policy aspects and the industry. If ultimately the goal is to have more circular practices, then yeah, this should be useful information going forward. And shall we take a look at the second set of results? And this is about waste. Construction and demolition waste is the largest waste stream in the EU in terms of mass. What is the best way to increase the reuse and recycling of construction materials at the building's end of life? And we do have a clear winner here, design for disassembly again. And not far behind it, use materials with high durability. And then we have developed material passports, and I saw that popping up in the question, so we'll be back to that in a minute. And also improved selective demolition to remove. So design for disassembly is our leading answer here from the audience. All right, and let's look at the final poll. As a consumer, and this seems really important, as a consumer, what would make you choose recycled or reused construction ceramic products for the renovation of your house? And it does look like we're talking to a specific type of consumer here. We have a very clear winner: ecological and circular awareness. And behind that, quite a way behind that, aesthetic aspects and design of the product, then cost, if the reused or recycled products are cheaper than new, but similar products, and then in last place, availability. All right, so that gives us the perspective from this audience, at least, of what would make you as a consumer go for reused or recycled products. Okay, then let's get to the questions. We've already kicked off the questions, but we wanted to share the polls with you, and I'm going to try and take as many of the audience questions as possible. So here we go. So there are some certification schemes already in place, such as LEED and BREEAM. How will the levels tool, Josephine, fit with those? What will be its position with end users? Do you think that end users will recognize the levels tool, or is it not really targeting end users?
Yeah, well, first to say that several of the biggest, or basically all the biggest European certification schemes, they have been involved in the development of levels, and several of them also in the testing of levels. There is now a project going on between many of those where they are looking at how they can best align themselves with many of the levels indicators. So the role there for levels is not to, as I said, levels is not a certification scheme.
Yeah.
So it is more a way of providing this common language to which other initiatives can align themselves to. But also, of course, we hope that by providing something which only uses a limited number of indicators and which doesn't require a full-fledged, how can I say, such a big process as the certification schemes would do, we're providing, as I said, a more simple entry point to this. Yeah. And we're not even suggesting that you have to use the indicators initially on a quantitative way, but you can use the framework to kick off a qualitative discussion between the different partners in the project. We can also we hope to see levels having an impact on projects even if they're not being certified. So it means that in one way, let me structure it like this, perhaps. I can see at least three different ways that I think levels can impact buildings. One is that it can impact on national or regional, for that matter, policy. The second one is that it impacts on certification schemes. So those buildings which are being certified will sort of indirectly be impacted by levels. And the third is that you may have building projects which are not sort of impacted by policy specifically in this area, and they are not going to be certified through, I don't know, HQ or LEED or BREEAM or whatever DGNB, but you want, as the investor, you want to make sure that your building is plays its role in the circular economy, that it's future-proof, and you want to take certain aspects of levels into account. Maybe resilience to climate change, maybe life cycle costing, etc. And then you can look at levels, and you can either do the full-fledged thing and use it to quantitatively calculate the indicators, or you can use it more as a basis for having discussions at an early stage. So those are different ways in which levels can impact.
Yeah, it sounds like, in a way, it sounds almost counterintuitive. In a way, you've lowered the bar by having fewer indicators, and it's not such a big process. But in doing so, the Commission hopes, it seems, that more people will get engaged and more people will choose some indicators and get started on working towards a more life cycle and a more circular approach. Is that a fair assessment?
Absolutely. No, definitely. And we think that, because what we know today is that about 1% of our, or even less than 1% of our buildings today have been assessed for any kind of sustainability performance beyond energy efficiency. That is, there are more buildings which have been, more than that, which have been assessed for their energy efficiency. But any broader kind of assessment, which we believe is very important, is very rarely done. So while we want to strengthen the certification schemes and make sure that they are including all the relevant or the most relevant aspects that we think one should do when considering life cycle and circularity, we also want to support policymakers who want to include this in their different initiatives on different levels, and we also want to make it easy for projects which probably wouldn't have considered certification in the first place, which, let's face it, most building projects are not being certified. We want to sort of support and encourage them to go in this direction as well, with taking it as a stepwise approach. Indeed.
And as you said, you continue to develop it after the launch.
Yeah, I mean, levels will be launched now in a few weeks, and then we consider that it will stay like that for some time. However, we will continue to work with developing policy initiatives which are then based on levels.
Okay.
But levels, the framework, will stay for quite some time. We will also be working on developing different kinds of support tools, web-based support tools to work with levels. So to help the user in collecting its materials, set up what are the relevant structures, how do you organize it, what do you need to do, what are the calculations that needs to be done, and also some training, online training that we are foreseeing to do on this as well. So that kind of work will continue.
Yes, I see. I have a clarification question from the audience about LEED buildings. So would LEED buildings be considered to be in line with the levels tool?
LEED, you said, yeah?
LEED compliant, yeah. LEED.
Yeah. I'm not an expert on LEEDs myself, but I mean, they are not part of the certification schemes which have joined us to develop and test levels. LEEDs by default is not aligned with levels. Yeah. We know that the bigger schemes in Europe are indeed working towards such an alignment. But we will need to see what happens with LEEDs.
Yeah, once you have it launched and it's up and running, it's really interesting. What about the link or potential contradiction between levels and the product environmental footprint, PEF?
I don't think there is any contradiction.
Okay.
I didn't show the. Let me see. There was one slide which I didn't show because I thought it might be a bit too
technical,
much.
maybe. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know if there's any possibility to show one of my last slides that I had on my presentation that you have available.
Yeah, there should be. So, Cerame-Unie, could we please put up Josefina's slides again on the screen?
And that would be slide number 9 then, which we didn't look at before.
Okay, let's just give it a chance to get that.
Yeah, because so what that shows, what the slide shows, is sort of a matrix of the different indicators that we are using in levels, and that they are structured along the lines that I mentioned before. So resource use, health and comfort, and cost, value, and risk. And you can see there when the slide comes up. Tell me when it comes up so that I'm aware. Then
Slide
you can
9,
see
yes,
that there is
ma'am.
one. So
There we
you
go.
have a matrix in front of you.
Yep,
What
that's right, we're there.
indicators those levels use? Yeah. So there you will see to your left, you will see this orange text then, which are the 3 different thematic areas, let's say. So resource use, health and comfort, and then cost, value, and risk. And then they are slightly split into 6 different macro objectives, which is the next column then. And then comes the indicators. So you will see that there is an indicator which is called 2.4, which is indeed life cycle assessment. And there is another indicator which is called 1.2, which is the life cycle global warming potential, which you could say is one indicator out of a full life cycle assessment. Those two, for those two, you would base it on existing standards for how you do a so-called life cycle assessment, whether you do the full one or if you do the one for global warming potential. Currently, today, we are linking that, or we're referring to the existing standards, the same standard on this. But we will then have to see how PEF develops, and how PEF being the product environmental footprint, and we will see how that impacts on potentially future revisions of the SEN standard. But we will, in levels, as I said, we are referring to the existing standard today. But PEF could then have an impact in the future on those standards, and hence on those 2 indicators. But for the other indicators, those are aspects which are not targeted by the footprint methodology. I hope that explains something. But so there is a link on part of levels. There is certainly a link to PEF, but on other parts it is not. And we will make sure that we always refer in the levels. We will always refer to the relevant standard.
Yep. Okay. Good. That's a helpful going down another level into levels. I also want to come to Gitta and make sure that we have some questions for you and that you get to explain a bit more. So what I saw on your slides, Gitta, was that the clay is extracted from, the top level of the soil. You said that the facilities, the factories, are usually, located close to that, and that the ground can be restored. Is that the right summary? You can put your mic on. You're on mute. Yeah. Is that a good summary of what you've explained, just for people who don't know how bricks and tiles are made?
Yes, that's a quite good picture, because actually what happens is, as mentioned, the clay is in just below the soil, so it's a limited number of meters that you actually dig into the ground. So if you see for yourself the farmer having his landfill, or his, what's it called? His field, yes. So you can actually, when looking, when clay is being digged out of the ground, you can see that on the left side, the farmer can start working after the clay has been taken away from the ground. Okay. So it's not like you are digging a big hole in the ground and you will stay there for years. It's more like a band moving. And then on one side, the farmer is kind of moving away so that they can dig the clay out. And then after this band of digging, he comes back and does his agriculture afterwards.
Okay. And so you were explaining to us that some of the brick and tile products can be reused, and in some cases, many of them are reused. Mm. And I wonder, do you have any data on that? Do you have any numbers about how much clay clay products are reused in the EU or in Denmark?
Mm. Well, the most valid figures we have are figures talking about the recycled products. Yeah, because that has been the dominating route for up till now, and it's at least the figures are between like 95 and 98% of the waste that is being recycled.
Okay.
And of course that's downcycling. What we would like
Yeah.
is to avoid that, and that's the hard part, as mentioned, having the business models, etc., for avoiding this downcycling. I think that here in Denmark we have, I mean, it's 3% of the waste of bricks that are reused.
But
So the numbers is very low so far.
they could be reused.
Yes, of course they can. And I would like to add that when looking at the roofing tiles, the scenario is quite different.
Okay.
We have much higher figures there. I think it's approximately 70% that are reused, especially in the southern part of Europe.
About 70% of roof tiles are reused.
Yeah.
As roof tiles.
Yeah.
Okay.
And Catherine, if I can add, if we take other examples, so for example, clay pavers, it's also possible to use them. It's reused, for instance, in the Netherlands for up to 90%. So it really depends on the kind of products we are talking about. If we take also the example of expanded clay, so you know the small clay bubbles that we put, for instance, in flower pots, and which is also used in buildings works, it can be almost endlessly reused as long as the clay, the expanded clay is not contaminated with substances. So depending on indeed the kind of ceramic construction products we are talking about, we can really go up to really high percentages of reuse.
Okay, thank you. Anne-Claire Bruin from Cerame-Unie, and we'll be hearing more from you later. Do you want to stick around on the panel, or will we see you in a moment?
What I can say, Juan.
Okay, you stay around, that's good. And we also have Josephine on the phone about levels and lots more questions about levels, but I want to get a bit more into, circular uses of ceramic products. In a way, there's no need, I guess, for those products to ever reach the waste stage. It can be applied in other applications, but as you said, Gitta, it's downcycling. So how do we get more of those products to really keep their usefulness and not just being downcycled for roads or tennis courts or whatever? What is needed?
I think first and foremost, because what I feel is that the interest in this is very high and it's increasing. But coming back to one of the issues is this having trust in the products, and hereby having people and investors being willing to take the risk of using these products. So what we need is to make sure that we can trust the quality of the products, and due to the fact that the type of products within the ceramic industry is so different, of course, different methods must be applied. But standards to some extent, standardized ways of measuring the quality, but also we need the tracking. What has been the history of these products?
Yeah.
That's very important as well, because previously, production facilities were different, focusing on the same quality throughout the whole line was not in focus in the same way as we see it today.
If a brick is good for 150 years as well, I mean, that's a bit of a tracking challenge, isn't it?
Yes, it is. It is. Yeah. And we haven't. I mean, I haven't got the answer here. We can give some. We can point out some of the issues that we find challenging. I mean, as long as sometimes you see constructions that has been polluted, so we have bricks or materials that could actually be used for many years, but we cannot use them in that way. And here comes the material pass, I think, into in line with that. We need to have more documentation on what we are doing with our constructions in the future. What do we put into them, and what do we do afterwards in maintenance wise and replacing stuff and things like that.
Well, let me call on Josephine and see if the levels tool is going to help build trust in recycled and reused products. You know, there's a need for this material passport, better tracking, knowing where the product came from, how it's been made, how it's been used. So I just wondered, does that fit within the levels framework, Josephine?
Yes, it certainly does. I don't know if there's any chance of looking at this matrix of indicators again, just to point out that, so that was
let's see if we can get those
slide
back up
number
on the
9.
screen. Slide number 9 again.
Okay, great. Super, super. So you will see there that there is line number 2, which is resource efficient and circular material life cycles. Now that's a long title for a macro objective, but there you will see there are 4 indicators, right? So you have a bill of materials, scenarios for lifespan, adaptability and deconstruction, and then the waste. So all of those indicators, and a life cycle assessment, of course, all of those indicators are very much impacted by, of course, what kind of materials you are using and how you foresee to use them. How long will they last? What is their lifetime? How can you extend the lifetime? How do you construct your building so that it's constructed for deconstruction as opposed to demolition at the end? All of these things linked to lifespan, how adaptable a building is, how can you deconstruct and then reuse or recycle your material as opposed to just having it go to landfill. All of those indicators have an impact, or are impacted, I should say, on precisely what Gitte talked about.
Okay. And I was wondering about the levels tool. You said, I think, that it's for offices and for residential. Is that right?
Indeed, yeah. Yes, indeed.
And is there a plan to roll it out to cover all buildings, or?
Well, I could say that when we, during the test phase, there were quite a lot of projects which also tested it on school buildings and creche, kindergarten, and that seemed to have worked very well. Now I don't think we would have to change it in order for that to fit. Okay. We are going to very soon start to revise the existing green public procurement criteria for office buildings that we have at the EU level. We are going to revise those criteria so that they are based on levels. Sorry. And when we do that, we will not only do it for office buildings, but we plan to include schools as well in that. Now, all buildings would probably be, that would either not happen or it would come much later because, for example, hospitals are very different kinds of buildings, or retail is also very different, warehouse, etc. They are different animals, so to say. So that's not what we're targeting at this point in time.
Yeah, and I think it's interesting when you said earlier that less than 1% of buildings are assessed for anything more than energy. Yes. So this would already be a huge step in the right direction.
Catherine?
Yeah.
Hi.
Sorry, I just had one comment because I think it's very important in when looking into levels and we're talking circular economy and the reuse of materials, that we have 2 very different scenarios, because we are now in what we will be building from now on and ahead. We can do the best in order to have our material passports and all the documentation, etc. I mean, that's luckily that's almost the easy part, but the hard part is, of course, when we talk about using old and renovating. So we have 2 routes. We have new buildings, new constructions, and we have the renovation line. So just for me, I just want to make sure that it's clear that these 2 scenarios are very different.
Yeah, okay, good. Thank you for making that distinction for us. That's really helpful. I'd like to invite Anne-Claire then just to make some concluding remarks from Cerame-Unie. Anne-Claire is Cerame-Unie's Construction and Sustainability Manager. Over to you, Anne-Claire.
Thank you, Catherine. So we are now coming to the end of our webinar. I would like to thank you all for your very active participation. And we were more than 175 stakeholders attending the event online from all over Europe. So it shows the interest for this topic. And I would like also to warmly thank our speakers and our moderator. During these 90 minutes, we heard very inspiring and engaging messages. While MEP Dolechal highlighted how important the construction products regulation is for the industry and how it can play a role in addressing the sustainability performance of construction products, Mrs. Lindblom provided us a very stimulating update on levels and how to bring buildings to circular economy. And last but not least, Mrs. Nielsen showed that the ceramic construction industry is already actively participating to the shift to circular economy, although we have some challenges ahead of us. So the ceramic as a whole is committed to the shift from a linear to a circular economy in which waste becomes a resource. And that's why I would like to take this opportunity to kindly invite you to the last webinar of our series of webinars on circular economy in the ceramic industry. So this last webinar will take place on 26 October at 10 o'clock, and it will address how refractories foster energy-intensive industries' competitiveness through circular economy. So for those who are not familiar with this sector, refractories are essential protectants for all heat-intensive production processes, including iron and steel making, cement production, glass, ceramics, aluminum, and non-ferrous metals. So concretely, it means that without refractories, these industries and all the products they produce would not exist. Refractories is also already on the path to circular economy and can be recycled to over 98% in various long term. So we really look forward to welcoming you again in this event. And yeah, that's it. Thank you.
Thanks, Anne-Claire. So just a quick wrap up from me. It seems to me that there's a really important interplay between the policymakers who set the regulatory framework, the ceramic industry who makes the construction products, and then of course the construction industry who builds the homes that we live in. Well, now we also work in them. And then as consumers, you know, we're buying or renting or renovating homes and other property. So as consumers, we look to politicians and industry to do the best they can to continuously improve. And what I've heard today makes me believe that as consumers, we also need to be more demanding and maybe more open also to recycled and reused products. We have more questions than we were able to get to, which is always a sign of a good debate. So I'd like to thank our panelists and thank you for watching, and we'll see you next time.